Good to go.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm Dan Sisik. I'm here with my friends, Samantha and Catherine. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a second. We are covering the book, Whatever Arises, Love That, A Love Revolution That Begins With You by Matt Kahn. We've been going through this over the last few weeks, and we're in chapter 6, and we'll be starting on that in a minute, but I'm going to first let Samantha and Catherine uh, introduce themselves.
Good morning, everybody. Samantha Studebaker Carl. I'm broadcasting to you from beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. Looking forward to this discussion this morning. And go ahead and let you get started, Catherine, while I let anybody else in here. Oh, by the way, if anybody wants to join us, go to Mindset Mastery Collective on Facebook, and there's going to be links in there that you can join into our Zoom meeting, which is where we'll broadcast from.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. It's Catherine Clement. Let me switch over to my scribd book. All right. So today we're going to be covering the clearing of all karmic agreements. Through interacting with those souls in the afterlife, one of the most interesting things I've experienced is a soul telling me how much it was run by guilt and obligation during an incarnation. I have often heard, I remember making agreements in many different lifetimes. I punished and judged myself for trying to measure up to those agreements. As they were able to see life from a much broader perspective, their guilt and judgment vanished. I've often heard them say, I now see that I never would have measured up to those agreements. All they were meant to do is to keep me occupied in the very structure that motivated me to search for ways out. Now that I'm free, I see those agreements were never made by me. They were things I agreed to when I wasn't in my right mind. From working with many individuals who are dealing with agreements that have been made in various lifetimes, I have seen firsthand the benefits of clearing such agreements. Any agreement you've negotiated was most likely created by ego. When your personality is no longer inflamed, you are not subject to the terms and conditions of an agreement. This essentially means that once each agreement made by ego is nullified, you are no longer stifled by the gravity of obligation. In the absence of obligation, you can freely make decisions and even create new agreements from the freedom and will of your own divine authority. Since the agreements made by ego were done in an attempt to guarantee outcomes that have already been orchestrated by the universe, they have no benefit other than offering relief once they are cleared. To experience freedom from any degree of obligation, please repeat the following healing mantra. Whether from this lifetime or any incarnation throughout, I clear, unravel, nullify, and transmute any agreements, contracts, energy cords, imprints, or attachments that I have accepted through obligation, conformity, manipulation, fear, or in an attempt to control the fate of a particular outcome in life. Excuse me. I hereby release these agreements, contracts, cords, imprints, and attachments for the healing, awakening, and transformation of one and all. As of this moment, I am free and clear to make decisions from the freedom and will of my highest divine authority through the power reclaimed as I am now. And so it is. It is also common for empaths to carry out over outdated vows from being monks and nuns in past lifetimes, including the Bodhisattva, I don't know that I say that right, Bodhisattva vow can be misinterpreted to suggest not leaving this earth plane until all beings are liberated, awake, and free from suffering. When taken at face value, it often cultivates righteous inflammation through a belief in spiritual martyrdom. The true essence of the bodhisattva vow is not a promise to keep, but an aspiration to fulfill. In becoming what seems like the first person in the world to stand tall in the beauty of your eternal radiance, you cultivate a vibration of heart-centered consciousness. The spiritual aspiration honored in a bodhisattva vow can often be depicted through the relationship between flowers and seeds. Just as a seed already exists as the potential of a flower, it must be grounded and exposed to the elements of nature in order to sprout roots and blossom into form. While seeds exist as the potential of flowers, they cannot sense the ecstasy of their own fragrance and release this perfume throughout the garden of humanity until they have come into bloom. To celebrate your willingness to blossom as a way of assisting all seeds throughout the cycles of growth, it is important to release even the formal spiritual vows unknowingly made under the influence of an inflamed personality. While such vows were well intended, they most likely have kept you occupied in a spiritual ego which can stunt the growth of your evolution. It's not as if any particular vow didn't have a purpose at the time they were taken. It's that releasing them celebrates the fulfillment of their role that cannot assist you any further until they are released. Even when you believe that you're coming from the purest heart-centered space, there is one key point that reminds you that only egos negotiate such agreements or take on any vow. In every spiritual agreement or vow, there is a perception that you are making a commitment to the universe, as if you are someone or something other than the universe in form. While an agreement can be made by a seed, that agreement is no longer valid to the reality of a flower. In order to transform seeds of divinity into flowers of truth, every vow or agreement that binds you must be resolved. Even when an agreement is made between two people, they are often agreeing to terms and conditions as if each person is something other than the universe appearing in form. If both are rooted in knowing themselves as the totality of all, no need for an agreement would even arise. This is much like your fingers not needing to make agreements with one another in order to work together as a hand. Whether it is a child agreeing to the demands of a parent as a way of avoiding further punishment, or hoping to earn their way into more loving approval, this kind of agreement often occurs in a state of duress. Knowing myself to have been a Tibetan monk from past lifetimes, I acknowledge the vows taken as some of the most beautiful declarations in existence. And yet, those vows were declared as something other than the universe, either as a character or agreements between characters, as a way of negotiating terms and conditions within a universe. It's not as if you shouldn't have ever made the vow or agreed to its terms, but it's more a sign of the times throughout an evolving planet. As beings evolve, so must the spiritual paths that hope to inspire growth and expansion from those who yearn to awaken. Through these words, I can confirm that you have arrived at an exciting point in history. You have successfully fulfilled the aspirations of your deepest spiritual impulse. Through the experiences you have survived up to this point, you have completed every requirement that any agreement or vow brought your way. In celebrating a graduation into a new level of consciousness, it is time to lighten the load and free yourself of the past so you can enter this moment fresh, renewed, and reborn. As you begin to see this moment as a spiritually aligned newborn, you bring to life the harmony of a brand new reality. In honor of taking such a courageous step into the heart of surrender than ever before, I invite you to repeat the following healing mantra. As the master of my destiny and the creator of my reality, I accept that all contracts, agreements, and every formal vow that I have made were not made by the truth that I am. They were agreed upon by an inflamed personality structure that I thought I was, but I now realize is not the highest truth of my being. I accept that neither the universe nor my highest truth would ever or could ever hold me accountable to agreements made when innocently lost in exaggerated states of unconsciousness. I accept that I wasn't wrong to take on such vows or make any agreements. These were part of a divine plan for me to incarnate into a world in which contracts, vows, and agreements were already in place. As I take the time to nullify them, I free myself and the world in the process. In knowing what I now know, I hereby nullify all contracts and agreements, known and unknown, seen or unseen, remembered and forgotten, throughout all cellular memory and my subconscious mind. I also release, relinquish, and surrender all formal vows I may have made as a monk or a nun. This includes the vow of poverty, the vow of chastity, and the vow of renunciation, the vow of silence, and all misunderstood bodhisattva vows, agreements of victimhood, codependency, and martyrdom, as well as anything else believed, imagined, agreed to, or assumed by ego. By the appointment of my own divine authority, I allow these vows to be cleared and released out of this energy field, returned to the source of their origin, transmuted completely, and returned to the purity, wholeness, and perfection of eternal light. As of this moment, I reclaim my complete and absolute power, allowing this personality to uniquely express the light of divinity that completes the mission I came here to fulfill. From this moment forward, I activate and embody a new heart-centered consciousness that heals, awakens, rebirths, and liberates all as I am now. And so it is.
Thanks, Catherine. I appreciate you reading that. You always do such a awesome job on the reading, as always. Any thoughts on clearing out, clearing, the clearing of all karmic agreements? Sorry, that word tripped me up. I have thoughts, but I'm kind of waiting to see what other people say.
Yeah, excuse me. When I first read this, I don't know, it reminded me of so many different things that we've read in the past of just the idea of letting go. But not just letting go of, emotions that don't serve us, but letting go of these ideas that don't serve us, these like things that we think we're obligated to do or be or act or say or any of those things. It's like we come into this world and we immediately are inundated with all of these things that are expected from us. All of these ideas are, roles that we're expected to play and things we're expected to do or not do, et cetera, et cetera. And we have all these just, I don't know, it's the human condition, right? That we are expected in some way to be something or act in some way. And it's interesting that he brings up this kind of idea that even though we're in this human experience and we are interacting with everyone else in the world, that these ideas of expectation and obligation are really just a human thing. It's not the universe. And if we are the universe by just being one aspect of it, and like he gave that example of being multiple, the fingers on the hand don't have to agree with each other in order to to work harmoniously. It just kind of happens because they're part of the hand, right? It was just interesting because I'm like, oh, okay, if we kind of put aside all of these ideas of what we think we're supposed to do or be or act because of the things that have been imposed on us because of our upbringing and because of our existence in the human world, then where does that leave us exactly? That's I don't know. It just provoked a lot of different thoughts. It's just very fascinating kind of aspect of it. I mean, can we clear away all of this, the guilt for not being, acting, doing whatever, because that's not us anymore. How many times have we? I'm gonna let everybody talk. Go ahead. I'm sure you all have something to say. I could probably go on for a while.
Okay, finally. I was trying to unmute and it took a second, but in reading this and not having been here last week to know what was kind of leading up into this, because I was at a conference and I haven't had a chance to review and get kind of caught up. But in reading this and in hearing what he's saying and some of what Samantha said, and I guess I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit, which I love to do, which if when we come here, if there isn't, and yes, I guess we might within the universe kind of know where we're at, but when we are here in this human existence, how do we figure out who we are if we don't see the expectations what others have of us, and learn to grow and then learn to figure out what is the embodiment of who we are without having gone through some of these things and making some of these decisions and choices and agreements. And to me, it almost seems like we're trying to absolve ourselves of having gone through those things and making those agreements to make ourselves feel better, rather than using that as part of the growing and moving and getting more in tune with who we are, with the universe, God, infinite intelligence, in that sense. And I think that's how we realize and can learn that, oh, that's not what I'm here for. That's not what my presence is. I think there's, we have to take some ownership of some of those things in order to open up and be able to grow and allow the other things in, which doesn't mean we have to continue and stay there and that we can't, let go of it. But I don't think we're fully absolved of it either.
So I would disagree a little bit. I think that we are absolved of all of it. And I think that he's pointing to not necessarily experiences that we have had in this incarnation. I believe he's referring to contracts, oaths, vows, commitments that we've made in prior incarnations, that then in this incarnation we and I think it would have to be by belief. When people, and a lot of energy healers would disagree with me on this, and maybe that's why I have a little bit of a different viewpoint of it. And this is one of the reasons I have a huge issue with taking money for, quote, energy work, because first of all, I believe everybody can do it. And so nobody should really have to pay somebody else to do it for them, because you can do it yourself. Just like this book, he has these statements, that these mantras that you can say, and just just the focusing and the saying of those mantras apparently releases us from those contracts. What I think really releases us from those contracts is not the saying of the mantras or the going to an energy healer and have them saying it. It is the recognition that these are beliefs that are untrue and we need to release them. I want to go back to this one sentence because I just believe in this so strongly. I accept that neither the universe nor my highest truth would ever or could ever hold me accountable to agreements made when innocently lost in exaggerated states of unconsciousness. And basically, that means being incarnated as a human. That's what that means. Those states of unconsciousness that we find ourselves here in, surrounded by other people in states of unconsciousness. And this is why I think it is all, we are absolved from all of it, because my higher conscious, my God anyway, no God that I would ever follow, would hold people accountable for what they do under the circumstances we find ourselves in here as human beings, with everybody playing all these assigned roles, some good, some bad, and yet the bad is maybe for the good of somebody else. So how could we ever be held accountable for crying out in desperation, making a vow or committing to something to try to maybe save our life here? You know, maybe as an abused child, you do things, you know, to take the heat off yourself from the abusers or whatever. How could any God ever judge us for making the decisions that we make here? I just don't believe it. And so the question comes, if you don't believe in them, do they still affect you? That's my question.
Yeah, I like the point that you bring up there, Catherine. You know what? I want to throw out another aspect of that. You know, if we are just one little molecule, if you will, of the universe, but I mean, our perception of it is this is everything, right? This is absolutely everything right here. What we can see, taste, smell, feel, feels like everything. But what if it isn't? What if we are just one little drop in the ocean of the universe, which is what I tend to feel? And if that is so, how can that one drop in the ocean that's floating around with a little bit of dust in it, you know, dust meaning it's quote unquote negativity or whatever, you know, how can that be judged by the rest of the ocean? So I look at that, and I also look at the fact that, you know, as humans, this human existence is so minute in the massive, insanely humongous, vast, infinite universe. How can this one little blip of existence be something that would judge us in that infinity amount of time? It seems to me that seems like unfathomable. I'll use that word, it's a better word. So I hear that's what I'm kind of feeling on that aspect. I have a lot more thoughts on other parts though. I see you want to jump out, Dan. Jump. Okay, I thought you had your finger on the mute button. Right now. Karen, did you?
No, I got it now. I got it. It's just with this slow internet connection I've got here, I'm trying to get that going before so I can hopefully be. I was going to say, okay, I can get part of what you're saying about, you know, that we're one small blip, and that how, but at that same point, we are souls and a part of this universe. So, and how do we not know what our one little bit of interaction, for lack of a better way of saying it, or being a part of it, and how we respond and how we deal with things? In some cases, we don't really know the full range and the full effect until we move. I'm going to use it this way. For me, it's personally dying and moving on, and to me, going to be with God. And in other instances, people might look at going on to be a part of the universe or infinite intelligence. But till we are more back in connection with the overall universe, how do we know on this side of it? How do we know how much of an impact we do have? We really don't, aside from what we see and interact with here. So to me, I still think that somehow a little bit of how we interact and what we do does minutely, and I'm going to say minutely because I cannot say what's really, there, affects. And we can, as from other books we read, we carry that knowledge and that understanding back with us into getting connected back with the universe for, I guess, the next time we come back into an existence, so to speak, of how we look at it like this. So in that sense, and it may not, and we may from there may see that it wasn't that big of a deal, or it might help us in the next realm to move forward, to move into the next realm of wherever we're going to be a part of. So that's, and I know it's convoluted the way I'm saying it because my brain is still trying to wrap around it, but I think that's kind of how I see it. And I can't just totally disregard that everything I do here doesn't somehow carry with me a little bit there. And from there, maybe that's when I sort it all out and then say, oh, well, that was, here, or there we get brighter illumination and say, oh, that really didn't matter. Or, oh, okay, carry that with me on to the next thing. That's kind of what I wanted to say.
And I don't
I
think
think the
that
life review is oh, sorry.
that's
Go
okay.
ahead.
Go ahead, Catherine.
I was just going to say, I think the life review is very important. And I think that we do learn and we do recognize, things that we thought were not important here and other things that, we thought really, I think all that definitely gets straightened out. I think it's important for us to recognize, though, that those aren't things that we have to feel guilty about, ashamed about, and carry that from lifetime to lifetime, experience to experience, like dragging this karma behind us. And, I kind of have always believed in karma. I've always, as a human, kind of wanted to believe in karma, that, if somebody does something, it's going to come back and bite them in the ass. But I don't know that that's necessarily true. I cannot tell you that is necessarily true. It is a concept that as a human, I have definitely gravitated towards, but at the same time, because sometimes it just seems like you witness instant karma. I don't know if you guys have had the pleasure of that. And I shouldn't have received pleasure from that, but sometimes somebody does something and then just something gets them right away and you're almost like, yeah, but I still, this goes around, I have to think about this because I don't think that I think what judgment we receive is, from ourselves during our life review, looking back at things and, wishing we had done things better, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're doomed for the next 10 lifetimes because of this karmic debt for having these reactions in an unconscious world.
Yeah, I feel like that this whole idea of the inflamed personality or the inflamed ego or whatever is the human existence, you know, and so that makes me really think about that, because I'm like, I can see so many times in my life where I have made a decision based on what I think is going to be best, not just for me, but for everybody else involved with me, so it's and yet one of the things I was thinking about here at the end of my notes that I was writing was that, we read all these books and it tells you that our solutions come from the inside. We work on ourselves from the inside out. And if we work on ourselves from the inside out, and yet we hold ourselves accountable to other people in terms of, we feel like we have to be, do, act, and say in order to make someone else happy or to make sure that they will be okay, then aren't we taking away from their power, their ability to do for themselves, to heal themselves from the outside, inside out? Or are we taking on this obligation to another person because we don't think they're capable of doing it for themselves? That was kind of something that came up for me. I'm like, if I feel like I am obligated to, say, I don't know, take care of someone in some way, shape, or form, is it because I think that they're incapable of existing in this universe without me? Is that an ego thing? That's kind of my question. Is so then that does feel like a decision made from the ego. But yet, on the other hand, we're in this human existence and we have all these people in our lives, and we do feel a compelling feeling to want to work with them, to help them and help ourselves and help, and it's this big question mark. It's like, what if we were to just only come here and see what the day brings and see what every event brings, and not bring obligation into our decisions, and just make our decisions based on that experience in the moment, in the here and the now, and allow for everyone else to make their own decisions in the here and the now, and not try and control other people by controlling ourselves. I don't know, those are just random thoughts.
Okay, I'll throw this out, but in doing that, then if we were to really be at that level and be at that, why would there be a need to be here and come here then? And experience and do that. And I know that we can't force other people and we can't open them up fully to maybe some of the things we've learned or grown or learned from all the books and things we've gone through when we started with more of a mindset for business type stuff and grown into where we've grown now. But at the same point, is and I'm saying it this way, and I may be saying it in the wrong vein, but I hope you get my thought process. Is part of coming here not to learn how to connect and take the experiences and what we're dealing with here and the growth, I guess, with us back to eternity with the universe and with God and all that, and better connect and be one with everybody in that plane or field or existence. Is that not part of what we're here for, in a sense? So to me, it's kind of like, a little both, I guess.
that's the question, isn't it? That is the question. What is the purpose of life? I mean, that's the question. We don't know. What is and we like to, or I don't necessarily want to say like to, but I feel like it is a common thought process that the purpose of life is to come here and do, be, act, say, etc. for everyone else. Here's one of the thoughts that came to me at the beginning when I was first reading this. I'm just going to share some of my notes here. And I said, are these unspoken agreements we make with each other necessary? This human perception of being separate seems to give rise to the idea that we must act, do, be, etc. in a certain way in order to live harmonious together in this world. But is that true? Do we need all these agreements? Does nature have all these agreements? It seems like so many in this world are rebelling against well-accepted agreements, such as gender roles. That's a huge one that everybody's rebelling against right now. Are these agreements really necessary? Is it my responsibility to act, do, be, etc. in a certain way in order to make sure everyone else is happy, okay, taken care of? And then I kind of just went back into this whole idea of, the books that we read are all telling us to find the answers from the inside out, and yet we have this common conception that we're supposed to fix, that we're supposed to do things to make everyone else happy. So those are just some of my thoughts.
I think it's a combination of a little bit of both. We work from the inside out, but because of the plane of existence we're in and on, finagle and work within what's around you. And in this existence, it goes back to, I think, the overarching thing of the book is loving that and so therefore loving truly and genuinely outwardly from the inside out, but at the same point also being open and willing to accept love, genuine true love from the outside in, that resonates or matches or helps grow that love and help us grow to that next level, I guess, how I'm saying it. And so I think it's all interwoven and works together. We're still trying to somehow figure a lot of this out and get answers. And some are farther along and others don't care, or they're not really actively looking, or they don't understand, or, and those of us that are working towards the plane of trying to understand better, I guess, want to help those so they can see and better, but it's almost like you can't force people either. If they're in their thing, it's, you still got to kind of work with that love idea and that love, going from that love, and just keep growing yourself, and hopefully maybe people will see and get that and gravitate towards that, and maybe open up eventually, I guess, in that sense.
When I was thinking about these agreements, the first one that came to my mind is this gender roles thing. This idea that we come here and we're either male or female, and for the longest time, and I don't know about way back when, but if for the longest time, it seems like these roles, we're born into this life either female or male according to biology, and then everyone around us treats us in a certain way because of our gender, and yet then you have these individuals who come into this life and they don't resonate with that, and yet they grow up in a family, say, that is very strict on this idea of, you know, you're a girl, this is how you're supposed to be, do and act, or you're a boy, this is how you're supposed to be, do and act. And yet then that person feels obligated to be that for all the people around them. But yet at the same time, we know, and from, or I wouldn't say we know, but we also can see and have been taught to be yourself, whatever that is. And so then this person struggles in their life for so much time because they want to be who they really are. And yet everyone around them seems to be telling them that's wrong and that that is not the way to be. And so that person holds themselves back, and they go through their life with these obligations and feeling horrible about themselves, or feel guilty, or feel like they're evil, or whatever. And I feel like this is kind of like speaking to that type of an agreement that we have been kind of programmed to think that we have to be a certain way, when in reality, or on the universal side of it, it's not our responsibility to make sure everyone else is going to be okay with who we really are. So I'm going to hold my thought for them.
Yeah, this section really makes you really have to sit back and think, and it for me, it's just really making me think, and because it's almost like, how do you answer, how do you ask, how do you approach this whole little section and kind of move forward, because it brings up so many other questions that in turn to bring up so many other questions that I don't think we would be able to fit it all in one sitting, so to speak. And it's one of those that I'm sure we could go on and on for a couple weeks and really dive into it, and really, who knows, we might draw out some things that really stand out, or we might, it might become even more of a quandary. I mean, that's, the beauty of some of these books. Sometimes they're answering a question, but at the same point, that question then, and it might be up to each person going through this to maybe it was, because it's going to make me think about it, when I do think about it and have free time, a little bit more about what was said, and how, even because I have pretty strong views of what I feel, what I believe, what I think, and but I've never been afraid to question and look, and a lot of times when I go through these things, it helps me just build up my belief more in what I believe more, and grounds me more. So in that, I've learned that for me, a lot of times it helps ground me more and helps me move forward, but it does give me new ways of interacting and thinking with people, and looking at things from outside the box, and maybe looking from a whole different perspective, and maybe where somebody else is coming from, or where they're not at yet. Part about this little section.
I think that I'll see if I can formulate my thoughts into sentences that might be understandable. There's really a lot to consider here, and one of the things that I consider a lot is the transgendering and I guess gender in general. It really is kind of interesting. I'm 73 now, and as you look across the decades and you see the different feelings and approaches that people have had towards those ideas and how explosive it all became about making sure everybody had their rights and trying to understand other people and so forth. And I find that I'm quite liberal as I sit and think and ponder and even meet certain people. And yet, as I watch television shows, movies, I can be aware that my emotions are not, they're not consistent, they're not in sync with maybe something that I felt in the last movie or saw in the last TV show, or met a couple that were strange to me. I don't think I have guilt about my own experiences, but I feel that I do have guilt about thinking about others' experiences. And I'll just give you a little example. I can't think of his name right now, but this young man that was basically beat up and hung on the barbed wire fences in Wyoming. Since I'm from Wyoming, I'm sure that impacted me a lot more. I can't remember now what I was going to say about that. I know that I talked about it. I had seen like a documentary or something, and the next day in a chat group, I was very tearful about the whole story, and I know that there's one person who really appreciates me for talking about it, for being empathetic about it, and it's because she has a son who's gay. And we talk about our setting here and how we can talk about how we feel, what we think, excuse me, what comes to our mind. And I had hoped that we could do that at that chat group, and time ran out, and I really have no idea how some of the other people who were there think about that. And I wish I knew. I wish we could do this kind of communication a lot more frequently with a lot more of our circles. I'll leave it with that for right now.
And just an
That would be
FYI,
wonderful, wouldn't it?
oh, sorry, Catherine. Just an FYI, Karen, his name was Matthew Shepard. And I think I saw the same documentary that you were talking about, or something similar, and that was a tragic thing. And that was because and I'm going to throw this out there, I think there are a lot of people that just have certain very strong viewpoints and who are not comfortable, and I'm using that lightly, I could use different terms of words, with things like that, only because they don't fully understand or they don't get it, or, or because their own, on that. And so with that, and that's part of a lot of what, I even put in the comments, on the YouTube point here in history where there are some big questions coming out from the human race in general that are being questioned, kind of like in times past. So back in history, if you look at history, there are big swings and big changes where against some of the norms from back then, like medieval times and other times and stuff, where thoughts and processes, kind of, changed and pushed against the general thought. And this might be one of those points in times in the human existence where something like that is happening again, and where, things are being pushed to help grow, to help go to what I was saying, people getting together and learning to be more loving. And I'm using that term because that's what this book, I think, is, mainly about: loving and putting love out and giving love. And when you give love, you tend to get it back too. So in that, maybe that's, this is one of those times in history where there's a bigger push from the human race kind of in general, going back to, I think, some points that Catherine made in prior discussions about that there's a shift coming and there's a movement and there's a change that's coming. I think she used the term collective or something closely associated with that. And I think the consciousness in relation to the universe. So maybe some of this is part of that, and that's part of what we're experiencing here. And maybe that's on a bigger level, clearing of the, what's that word? Karmic agreements. Maybe, it's a trickle down effect from a, more broad scale, even down into our own human scale too. And, that might be something to look at or think about.
I think another kind of generally accepted agreement is that if we don't, work towards being harmonious with each other by, following these generally accepted rules and guidelines, that the whole world would fall into chaos, and or that would all go to shit, everybody go to hell, everybody be mean and horrible to each other. I mean, not that they aren't already, but my kind of thought process on that is, who's to say that that is true? Now, if we look at nature doesn't have all these rules and guidelines that it goes by. Every individual thing that grows outside, whether it's animals or plants or, even the wind, biological functions, all these things, they just kind of happen. And they aren't worried about each other. This tree right here is growing and being huge, and it's like putting branches out over other trees. It's encroaching on other bushes. It's doing all of these things just as it's just existing in nature in and of itself and being amazing. And the tree next to it isn't complaining about it. The tree next to it isn't going, you are in my space, what the heck? Get out of my space. I'm mad at you because you shouldn't be in my space. This is my space. The birds don't do that. The animals don't do that. And when a male bird comes in here and tries to get with the female bird that is already with another male bird, they fight it out or whatever, but then there isn't this whole big, you shouldn't have done that, and and with animals that eat each other, I mean, imagine what would it be like, a strong person of whatever sort just decides that he's going to go and attack another person and rip its guts out and eat it, that would be horrifying in the human race, but yet animals do it all the time. And I'm not saying that we should do that. That's not the point I'm trying to make here at all. I'm just trying to say that just because, we have all these agreements with each other that we are or are not going to do this, that, or the other, it doesn't make everything harmonious. And if we didn't have all these agreements with each other and we just lived and let live, we may not have as much chaos as we have right now. Or it might be the same, in which case, at least then, we wouldn't be making every decision based on fear of what someone else will say, someone else will do, someone else will feel, someone else will act. We would be making our decisions based on our true self. So if we look back at this idea of the gender roles and where a person is feeling obligated to act in a certain way because of everyone around them, rather than acting in the way that they truly are, and letting everybody else deal with their own crap about it, So that's what I feel like in nature. That's what happens, they all just kind of live. They're beautiful and amazing, and they aren't arguing with each other all the time about who's right, who's wrong, who's supposed to, who isn't supposed to. Humans are the only ones that do that. We are past the top of the hour, by the way.
We started late, so
I'll just
go ahead, Catherine. Sorry.
just a final note, because I know we need to go. So I think part of the purpose of this chapter, of course, is to get past guilt about things. And I would just offer, and I've offered this before, but I'll just offer it again, that when we're feeling guilt or shame or anger or fear, really any emotion, but I think especially with guilt and shame, I think we need to recognize that we're judging ourselves in that moment or judging someone else in that moment. And that the reason that we're feeling that feeling is not because we have done something wrong, but it's because our higher self, which, semi-occupies this body that we live in, just a little bit of it, because we would fry our circuits if our whole higher self came into these little bodies. But when our higher self knows that we're lying to ourselves, that, when we're not in alignment with how our higher self would look at that situation, that's when we feel those emotions. So those emotions are not a reason to go into a 6-month depression or to beat ourselves up or self-flagellate ourselves over these things that we've done. Those emotions are there just to remind us that we are out of alignment in that moment. We're not in congruence with our higher self on that subject. That's the only thing those emotions mean. And they're just there to remind us to get back on track and maybe take a step back from the situation and look at it from the observer point, from the higher self viewpoint. And you'll feel the shift immediately, because they don't have, when you get in conversations with these higher beings or these other aspects of self, however you want to look at it, all that judge and guilt and blame and shame is not there. It's just not there. So I think when we feel those emotions here, that's just to remind us to get back to our higher self and not get drawn into these unconscious, untrue beliefs and limitations that we place on ourselves. Love you guys. Have a great week.
Okay, with that, we're at about 8:12, 8:15. So with that, that's it. Unless anybody else has any last thoughts or anything, we're going to wrap it up for the Saturday Morning Mastermind. We're in the book, Whatever Rises. Love that. The Love Revolution That Begins With You by Matt Kahn. We're still in chapter 6, and we'll be going on to the next section, which is, let's find it again. But we just finished clearing out the karmic agreement. So I think we're around page 120 or something. So with that, see you next week on the Saturday Morning Mastermind.